we will be presenting results which we are running in different projects, not only PACTORES. So the research of the social dimensions of pastoral systems is part of the work package 1 in PACTORES, but we will be presenting also some research we did with the doctoral student we have here in grinding, or the research that Elisa and Federica did also with Maria Fernandez Jimenez, and then Michele present his results also as part of the work he did with the Marie Curie, and also the work he's doing with the PACTORES. So maybe we start with the policies, Feliu and I will be interrupting each other. So during the presentation, but he starts.
Okay, well, again, thanks Francesco and all the colleagues of FIAM for the fantastic organization. So let's go. The traveled relationship between policy and pastoralism. This is what we will do now. However, before starting to examine this relationship, we should stop and think first, why care about pastoralism? So why care about an activity that in the majority of our life we just meet as a folkloric activity, in exhibitions, in fairs, as a kind of touristic asset? So why care about this activity? However, a more careful look at it make us know that it's in fact an activity well spread all over the world. You have a map of the main pastoral region of the world. You see the importance of the
sorry,
yeah.
Feliu, you are showing the previous version of the presentation.
Really? Ah, man. Well, okay. Ah, disaster.
This one has not the new slides.
Wait a minute then, sorry. Too many drafts. Yeah.
It may take some time before now. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, okay, thanks, Marta. So, well, a more careful look at this activity, we see that it's in fact a quite well spread activity, resource management activity all over the world. In fact, the last data showed that in a little bit more than 1/4 of the global land is being managed somehow by pastoralists, and maybe there are estimations of about 500 million people doing this activity. So it's in fact a quite a very important activity. You have to help me with moving the pages, Mark. Thanks. Also, concerning the importance of this activity, well, in a world that it is estimated that the meat consumption will be increasing in the following years, certainly one of the capacities of pastoralists is meat production. So probably in this sense, there is a ground for pastoralists to still somehow granting this product. However, not only pastoralists are good in providing meat, but also energy through draft power, household fuel, sources of fiber, manure, also savings. No? Livestock has two very interesting attributes that make many people use this activity to make their savings. No? It's an activity that you can move the livestock. So if an inconvenient conditions turn up in a particular region, you can move them and somehow save your savings. And also they grow. So there is a kind of interest rate, something that happens less and less in our conventional bank accounts. So, and also it's a matter of social status, cultural identity. So pastoralism is not only good in providing this meat, but also many other services and products. Marta, if you can.
Yeah, actually, in our work we did, and we just published last week with Randy, he's a doctoral student in our chair, and he was working in understanding which are the nature contribution of people, nature contribution to people, sorry, although I will argue that it's nature contribution of people in the case of strong human nature relationships, socio-ecological systems. But in any case, looking at the contributions of pastoral system from the NCP perspective, no? And this is one of another way to show how relevant pastoralism is for the rest of people who are not pastoralists, no? So the NCPs, which is like a new framework which is provided by the IPBS, no? Which is the Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. So which is, like the IPCC, but more working on biodiversity and ecosystem services. And they provided this new framework where the social dimensions, issues like identity, are better covered than in the previous framework of ecosystem services, which still is very valid, no? And you will have a better view of this in module 2 with the Parides team. So we could see how really pastoral systems contribute to regulating services, particularly to pollination, habitat creation, to the protection and the contamination of soil. So really very important contributions in terms of regulating services, but also material and non-material. Of course, material, food and feed, that's very clear, no? But in terms of non-material, the issue of identity is very strong in pastoral system, no? And one of the NCPs that is provided by this system worldwide.
Marta, some people are asking if you can make the slides larger.
No.
Because now we see the first one, and also the next one is smaller.
Huh?
Yeah.
This I don't know. Maybe I can try to just, because when I share my screen, I don't see your contribution. But if I do like this, it's better.
Yeah.
Is it better now?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So despite all the benefits, this activity that provides so many products and services, however, there is a kind, well, we all agree that, or there is quite consensus that the situation that pastoralism is living nowadays is quite vulnerable. No? Just take an example of the climate change and transformation that are somehow squeezing this activity, no? Droughts, changing in seasonality, rising temperature, rising snow, floods. No? So pastoralism is being somehow very much present from many sides.
And in the particular case of climate change, which is what is we are presenting here, is not only the direct impacts on the animals, but also the impact through the grass, through impacts on grassland, which is, the main feed production, the main feed of pastoral system, which is also impacted by climate change. No.
Here, an interesting, okay, there is quite consensus on the vulnerable state of this activity. There is not so much consensus on how to interpret the situation. No? And in fact, there are many groups of opinion. No? And we can split in two large groups this different view of this situation. No? The first one see that pastoralism is vulnerable because to the climate, but also to the ecological changes, because it's an activity very much depending on them. It's very much linked to this context. So if this outside context that we cannot control is changing, certainly this affects this activity, and this might explain why this activity is vulnerable. Another group of opinions see the other way around. So we all know that pastoralism is an ancient activity, as Elisa reminds us from the Bronze Age and all these things. So there is this implies that this activity has been generation of people, of pastors, dialoguing with these changes and accumulating skills and capacities and strategies to deal with them. So in fact, these people think the other way around. This activity is very much skilled and trained to deal with these changes, because has been doing this for a long time. No? Also, this second opinion can even Marta, sorry, can even be split into more sub streams of opinion, let's say. The first say that, okay, yeah, pastoralism is a very much skilled activity. However, the magnitude of the present changes are so large that the capacity of adaptation of this activity falls, it's shorter. So the changes fall beyond the capacity, go beyond the capacity of adaptation of this activity. And sorry, Marta, and also the last substream, and this is the very last, I promise, Marta, is the fact that the pastoralists are vulnerable despite the great capacity of adaptation, because there are obstacles external to the business of pastoralists that are somehow undermining this capacity of adaptation. And probably is in this context where it makes sense to explore what is the role, particularly in this, of the policies we are developing. Yeah, Marta. Well, so in a examination in a study published in Global Environmental Change some years ago with some colleagues and Marta, we identified somehow the four main elements characterizing the vulnerability of pastoralists worldwide. The first is this that I was just mentioning, this double nature of the exposure of pastoralists, this exposure to climate and non-climate forces, to ecological and non-ecological forces. The second is the great, as has been mentioned along this the last minutes, the great capacity of adaptation of pastoralists. We identified around 50 different strategies employed by pastoralists to adapt, to somehow dialogue with the changes coming from the environment. Another interesting issue is the multifaceted role of market. So somehow introducing some advantages, but also some disadvantages at the same time. So and finally, the issue at stake here is the persistence of unfavorable development policies. And in fact, we identified that between the non-climate forces, the one related with the inappropriate policies were the most relevant driving forces undermining the adaptation capacity of pastoralism.
Yeah, so one of the things that we want to highlight with our presentation today is that because of these different perceptions that exist out there about the capacity or the contribution of pastoral systems in all of their forms, agro-pastoral system, pastoralists, and so on, these different narratives arrived also to policymakers. So we need really to reinforce and provide evidence of how pastoral systems really contribute. All the previous presentation we have on the relevance of pastoral systems, we need to show when there are policies or there are these drivers of change affecting pastorals, they also impact the nature contributions to people that we all want to preserve. So here in this one, you can see, for instance, like policies has a very strong impact in terms of the provision of food, which is a material NCP, but also in terms of the learning, inspiration, identities, but again, very much into the regulating NCP in terms of habitat creation or the decontamination of soils and the preservation of soils. Considering also that protection and decontamination of soils is very relevant in the context of climate change, when we know that most of the actions, strategies in terms of both mitigation and adaptation to climate change are linked to the health of soil, the preservation of healthy soil. So putting in value all these NCP associated, and also making visible how different drivers of change, but particularly, as you can see here, policies and socio-demographic and socioeconomic, which are in Work Package 1, Module 1 here, and also in the Module 3 presented by Thanos, have a very strong impact of the NCPs provided by pastoral systems. So making this evidence and these relationships is very important in order to reinforce the narrative around the importance of pastoralism in our ecosystems and in our traditions, culture, political, and so on.
Well, now we would like to share with you some results of this this part of the PACTORES project that has been focused on the implication of the pastoralism, of the existing policies on the Mediterranean pastoralism. We have run an examination on 7 case studies, one in Spain, two in Italy, one in Greece, one in Turkey, and also in Tunisia and in Algeria. Well, you can skip this, Marta.
Yeah, that's
and also this, I think.
Yeah, this is just a short review of the methodology. These are the case studies.
Yeah, then we can just very briefly show you some data, some of the main explaining trends in order to make sense the 7 case studies, and in order you to familiarize with the 7 case studies we have analyzed. This is a case study in the Catalan Pyrenees in Spain. It's a mountain region. Basically, pastoralists, as you all know, are located in mountains, drylands, and cold regions. In the case of the Mediterranean, most of them are quite related with mountain landscapes. The livestock raised here is sheep, cattle, and horses, also some goats. And the main lines of conflict, of tension here is the cohabitation of pastoralists with tourists and also with nature conservation areas. And well, probably the main vulnerability driving force here is the land abandonment. The second case study is the one in Greece, in the Peloponnese region. It's also a Mediterranean mountain landscape. In this case, the livestock reared is sheep and goat, also are transhuman ones, as in the previous case. And also here, the main tension again is between this activity and the existence of tourism, and as before, land abandonment probably is one of the main changing trends the region is undergoing. Sardinia is a particular case probably. It's an island, as you all know. Here, dairy sheep farming is the main strategy characterizing agropastoralism in this area. Here we have to talk about agropastoralism. The agropastorals here are quite close to an important city. So the strategy characterizing this region is focusing on a high value, even economically value product, which is the pecorino di Osilo, because also the closeness with a consumer center allows this. Also tourism, agritourism plays an important role here. Again, we stay in Italy, and again we move towards a mountain system in the Marche region. It's a transhuman system between summer and winter. Nature conservation and pastoralism probably is the main line of discussion here somehow. Sheep and cattle are the animals raised, and again, as in the Greece and the Spanish case, land abandonment is an important driving force. Tunisia in Tatawin, here is the landscape is a steep, dry steep one, with sheep, goats, and camels, the main animals raised. Here, meat, milk, wood, leather are the main products pastoralists obtain from this activity. And here, the main drivers changing the system or menacing the system is the conflicts over land tenure and also the climate variability. And the case of Algeria, here pastoralism is quite integrated. It's a high plateau, so it's also again is a kind of the mountain landscape is related with pastoralism here, but also it's a high plateau, so cereal cultivation and the employment of the fallow of it. It's a relevant asset here for pastoralists. Sheep, cattle, and goats, milk, meat, and manure are the main products provided by and services provided by pastoralists. And here again, as in the case of Tunisia, probably land access is the main line of conflicts. And finally, Turkey, the West, this case studies in West Turkey. It's a silvopastoral system with sheep, goats, and also some tree and shrub species being cultivated. Again, as a mountain region, and relevant threads of this, relevant elements of this system is the importance of self-consumption, and milk, cheese, and meat are probably the main products of pastoralism in this area. Yeah, well, I think we have a brief overview of the 7 case studies, and this is, you have a, well, we will not go deeper on this. This is the kind of analysis we did. You have in the first column a group of policy domains. So each item is not a policy; it's a group of policies, and then we for each group of policies. We use group of policies in order to allow comparability between the case studies, because the nature and of the policy measure tend to be quite different. We identify if the sources of this policy measure were international, national, or regional, and also what effects and what domains to what domains of the pastoral system these policies were affecting. We distinguish between the agro-pastoral ecosystem, the pastoralist households, and livestock, and also effects on society. Here we mean the capacity of this system to provide products and services that the rest of society value. Just, well, 2 main ideas. This is an example of the case of the Catalan Pyrenees. The great diversity of policies here. We have the case of Greece. Great diversity of policies are affecting pastoralism. In the case of the European cases, international source of legislation is important, basically because of the common agricultural policy. And another very interesting element to have a look at is somehow the dual effects. No, it's very common that a very policy measure have positive and negative effects on pastoralists, and also and it is a shame you see how many negative are located there. So we identified many situations of detrimental effects of policies affecting these affecting pastoralists. And another trend we can identify is the fact that if you see the amount of negative decrease significatively on the last column, which is the column on the effects of pastoralism on society. So so this shows what this is a first interpretation we give to these results, that somehow the weight or the power of consumers on the development or on the policy making of these policies probably is larger than the capacity of producers to having an influence on it. But well, this is a first interpretation. We are elaborating the results, so hopefully in some few months we will be able to somehow confirm or not this hypothesis, this idea.
And also higher than we expected, no? Because we are very much also in the focus on producers, no? I mean, livestock keepers, no, as the main, you know, the group of pastoral livestock of pastoral groups, no, like the strength they have as the collective action in terms of influencing policies. And we were surprised in this preliminary resource to find, you know, the consumers have probably a strong influence too.
You can skip this, Marta. We have already mentioned these main trends, I think. Mm. Yeah. And also this. And this. Yeah, I think more or less is what we have already mentioned. Well, then, trying to some one question then. No? What elements we have somehow make this first inventory of implications of the policy measure on the different domains of pastoralism? So what elements make policies being not adequate for pastoralism? first element, and have been already mentioned by Marta, by Elisa in this workshop, is the poor capacity of influence of pastoralism. No? So this is somehow, this can be interpreted into ways. Is the little room policy making processes provide to them, and also, and I think if we love pastoralism, they have to be self-critic as well. The little capacity in general they have to organize themselves. Then there is also the lack of consideration of NCPs or ecosystem services. This is relevant in the sense that pastoralism is an activity focused on enhancing use values, that is utilities. And the thing is that the system we have nowadays, and the political one, is based on focusing on exchange values. When we only pay attention to the exchange values, which is money, certainly the picture you have about pastoralism is it is an economical activity. So a challenge for the new policies to come is to put emphasis on these exchange values, which is nothing else than saying that put emphasis on these ecosystem services or this natural contribution for people or of people of pastoralism. This is very much related to this other element, which is the present policies give too much relevance to the productivity, which is it's the same as the exchange value. Another important element that turned up is the agricultural centered mentality of the present policies. In fact, it is the agricultural centered mentality of the states we are organized in, no? This mentality of this static mentality. Yeah, and this make that some specificities of pastoralism, like for instance, this is clear mobility, are totally disregarded and not considered, and often seen as some menaces to the system. Yeah, yeah. Then let's move. No, this is so what elements make policies favorable what elements are policies that favor pastoralism should somehow observe? Obviously, a recognition of these NCPs, then somehow being based on a co-design and not only co-design, also co-implementation. No? This is this room that we are asking for in the policy making and policy implementation processes for pastoralism. No? And this is not only this is also important in order to be able to implement better informed policies, because in many occasions, even the situation is that there are well-intended, well-intended policies, but given the lack of knowledge on the pastoral system, the consequences are not good, or ended up in traps. No? This is very much the case of sedentarization schemes, irrigation schemes, or the subsidies, or most of the subsidies, which ended up trapping the pastoralists in a system that they cannot control, and there is no way back. Another very relevant issue that emerged is focusing on the reproduction of the system. This is quite a change in the paradigm, because this makes that the policy should be less sectoralized, a more holistic view. Also, the perspective should be long-term. The pastoral is not good in short-term results. It's very good in long-term products, providing products and services in a long-term view. Pastoralism is not good in providing a lot of meat. It's good in providing meat sustained in time, no? Which is the thing. And also, and I think the first or the second question to Elsa has somehow revolved around this issue, is the fact that because somebody, sorry, I don't, for Julio, I think somebody were asking if the capacity of pastoralists to adapting to the policy. Well, maybe should be the policies that should be adapted to pastoralism, and maybe should be the policies who start using units of analysis that are relevant for pastoralism. And one example of this is, instead of using as a unity of analysis the individual pastoralist using, for instance, the community of the pastoral household. And also another very much interesting issue here is the lack of credibility for many pastoralists of the information that they receive from the top, from academia, from technicians. So another way of adapting policies to them, not adapting them to policies, is identifying pioneers among them and stimulate them. So these pioneers have much more credibility for them that many other information and very much interesting data from us or from technicians. So there is here a room for improving many things, we believe. And finally, the promoting the knowledge between consumers and the general public of this activity. Pastoralism is a complex activity. Consumers and producers are becoming less and less, more and more far away. And well, there is room to somehow remit both, because as we will say in the end, I think both want the same thing. So it's a matter of making links. Well, so what lies behind this persistence in issuing and not favoring policies for pastoralism? Rather here, the great thing is the persistence of unfavorable narratives, picturing pastoralists as an economical individuals, picturing pastoralism as ecologically damaging activity, picturing pastoralism as culturally backwards. Once you have this in your mind, out of this, okay, there is no problem in dispossess them. There is no problem on encroach on their lands, on their trails. So, well, this I think a central issue. Lack of political representation. We have mentioned this several times. It's a matter of giving room for them to express, but also of themselves being organized. Failures of well-intentioned policies. We have already mentioned this. It's relevant. Also, too much focus on technical developments. We have a society, a system that tends to solve socioeconomic problems very often with technical solutions. We know that well, often this tends not to be the case, but also there is a special particularity with pastoralism. Yeah, pastoralism is an activity specialized in the exploitation of irregularities, the exploitation of resources that are unevenly distributed in time and space. So then the traditional techniques we employ to understand the world, which are based on finding regularities, on working based on averages, tend not to offer good pictures of the pastoral world. It's another interesting issue here. And also I think Elsa mentioned this is the difficulties in finding appropriate ways to deliver public services for these marginal people far away from cities. No, there's decentralized governments, static governments. Well, find a lot of difficulties in helping these people, and also if these people are seen as ecologically damaging. So this is the well, when you have internalized this unfavorable narrative, there is no room in providing services to these people, and there is no problem in dispossessing them. Well, so this is a kind of summary, of the vulnerability. We see that the vulnerability it's kind of double entity. There is a kind of induced vulnerability, which is this vulnerability we are talking about in this presentation. Is this vulnerability that comes from external elements? Is these obstacles to the traditional adaptive capacity of them? Is this so? And appropriate policies will be here. Is this vulnerability that stems from external elements to the pastoral business? And also there is the strategic vulnerability. The strategic vulnerability means this vulnerability that the pastorists assume as normal. They focus on them. Is this vulnerability that, okay, when you are dealing with with the ecosystem out there, things change. So and is this a strategic vulnerability that they have been training along generation to deal with? The problem is when this strategic vulnerability that they assume is you put this induced vulnerability, which is from external elements, and then this somehow change their whole system. And just to finish somehow. So we have here a system which it's a kind of dichotomies. No, we are displacing and encroaching on this activity, but at the same time we are giving subsidies to them. We don't know at all how these people think and how the pastoral entails, but on the other side, we are appreciating very much all the services they grant for us. We have a problem in generational renewal because there are many people that want to do this job, but we have no land for them. So I don't know, if you want to run a business, you need skilled people and people willing to do it. You need a good idea and you need people that need this. So I think pastoralists fulfill these three attributes. So it's a matter of making the links. And I think in making these links, certainly developing adequate policies can play a very relevant role as a catalyzer of these missing links, I would say. And well, thank you very much for your attention, and congratulations to the Francesco. And
we'll be the first to break the ice. Okay.
May I put the video, right? Meanwhile, you can think your questions.
La ganadería extensiva es una actividad socioeconómica tradicional que se basa en el aprovechamiento de los recursos naturales locales. Que haya perdurado hasta nuestros días no es casualidad. Utiliza ratas autóctonas acostumbradas al clima y a la orografía. Sigue estrategias de movilidad por pastoreo y aprovecha el conocimiento del medio perfeccionado durante generaciones. De esta forma, aunque la disponibilidad de los pastos sea cambiante, la ganadería extensiva siempre ha sido capaz de adaptarse. En la actualidad, consecuencias del cambio climático, como el aumento de las temperaturas, los periodos prolongados de sequía o la variación de las estaciones, influyen en la disponibilidad de los pastos, reducen los puntos de agua e incluso alteran el metabolismo del ganado. Y aunque la ganadería extensiva tiene la capacidad demostrada de adaptarse, a estos cambios se suman presiones de tipo económico y social que ponen en peligro su viabilidad. Es una actividad en gran medida excluida de las políticas agrarias, sometida a regulaciones inadecuadas y perjudicada por las políticas comerciales. Si añadimos la competencia de otras actividades por el uso de las tierras y el abandono rural por la falta de infraestructuras y servicios, la situación se agrava. Es imprescindible revertir esta situación, porque la ganadería extensiva no solo es capaz de adaptarse al cambio climático, sino que puede ayudarnos a mitigarlo. Por su relación con el entorno y el manejo por pastoreo, aporta diversos servicios ecosistémicos, reduce el riesgo y la extensión de los incendios al controlar la vegetación, mantiene la biodiversidad, mantiene los principales sumideros de carbono y cumple con una función clave en la fertilización natural de los suelos, evitando así el uso de abonos sintéticos. Además, la ganadería extensiva lleva asociado un importante patrimonio cultural. Nos proporciona alimentos de alta calidad y contribuye al desarrollo económico y a la dinamización del medio rural. Por todo ello, debemos garantizar su continuidad, adaptar la regulación y desarrollar políticas activas que fomenten este modelo de ganadería, ya que además de aportar múltiples beneficios sociales y culturales, puede constituir una herramienta ideal de mitigación y adaptación al cambio climático.
Thank you. Thank you to the organizers for inviting us. And I'm Federica, and I will present with Elisa our work on gender and women's roles in pastoralism. A work that comes from several projects, and with the collaboration of Maria Fernandez Jimenez, as Marta said, and the same Marta. And these are the projects that were involved in this work. And why we take care on this topic specifically? I think we can say, as Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie says, that the silence is a luxury we cannot afford. And I use this sentence because it remembers to me what we observed with our own experiences, that if there is a marginalization and silence and an under consideration of pastoralist system, within these marginalized systems and society and world, there are voices that are silenced more than these, and usually are silenced the women's words. And there are also other reasons. As in the 44th meeting of the Committee of World Food Security in 2017, women play a crucial role in pastoralist societies, and not just as livestock producers, income generators, and caregivers, but especially in being keepers of local knowledge, and also in maintaining the pastoralist community's life and identity, as you can say. And there are also a key reason in terms of research. Recently, both researchers and development practitioners, especially in the Global South, have started working on issues of gender and women's roles in pastoral systems. And the focus has mainly started with the focus on women, and specifically the women's ecological knowledge, but also other studies have focused more on the gender division of labor and the gender relations within the households and within the communities, the access to property rights and access to resources, and the gender inequity on such access, and also the gender dimensions of information access, including extension services. However, most of these studies are mainly in the Global South, and very few studies are focused in the Global North. And some previous studies are from US and Australia, mainly. And I give you here some of these studies, especially focusing on women's roles and needs in the USA. Another study from our colleagues, Maria, focus more on how women sustain the rangeland system, especially looking at how they engage with no-ranching actors for lobbying, for instance, or how they can facilitate the intergenerational transfers, especially of traditional ecological knowledge. Other studies have much more focused on affective approaches and specific feminist issue. Other studies have much more focused on the networkings activities and innovation in this sense for ranching, promoted by women. And finally, some studies have also focused on more technological innovations promoted especially by women in pastoralism system. However, the invisibility of women in pastoralism studies in Europe and especially in Spain has been quite evident in our initial literature research. What's the situation in Spain of women in pastoralism in general? Women have been, during a long time, part of the extensive livestock systems, but they are being really invisible in some way. Today, some new statistics show that probably women are in terms of numbers, are equal than men working in the sector, including salaried and non-salaried working, family work. But there are really differences between women and men, especially because men continues to be the primary decision makers within the family, and they are the person registered in terms of the livestock operation. Spain have approved a law of ownership very recently, but at the moment, very few women share the ownership under this law. And this is due to two main reasons. First, because there are, in most of the cases, there is a machista culture, so they need the approval of the husband. And secondly, because there are high costs and the lack of administrative officers trained to assist the women in these processes. And also because they should pay within the same family two different financial costs that is not assumable within the same family. This is to give you like an overview of the issue. And we would introduce now what are the theoretical framework and analytical framework that we mainly adopted in our work. First, as we said, the first contribution are from rural sociologists and geographers, because they have produced this rich literature of women and gender in agriculture in general, even if we not have so many literature specific. But we adopted and we draw part of our work, especially the first paper that we will present later, on feminist agri-food system theory that was applied by Sachs and other authors in the US to study these women's roles in agriculture. And these framework mainly focused or resume 6 topics really interesting in analyzing when we are analyzing gender dimensions in farming systems. The first one is related to the gender equality in the farm and how women can contribute more at this gender equality. The second one is related to how they are asserting their identity as farmers differently from other subjects within the farming system, how they are accessing to the resources of, or they have barrier to such access, and the different and the different production needs, how they are shaping new foods and farming system, if they are, and how they are navigating their discriminatory organization and institution, so at another scale of sectorial scale, we can say. And finally, if and how they are forming, creating, building or reinforcing networks specifically among women farmers. We also applied 2 other frameworks that converge in our studies. The first one is a framework that we wanted to present to you that is from rural sociologists, feminist rural sociologists. And it's the framework of O'Shaughnessy and Krogman. And it's quite interesting because it put the stress on the contradictions, material and discursive contradictions in women's practices and discourses around the natural resources uses. And why it's quite important, this focus on contradictions, because it's also, in our studies, it was also interesting to explore the differences between women and to explore key issues of the other feminist political framework that we adopted, that is a more feminist political ecology framework. And it's the focus on intersectionality. Adopting this framework of Shaughnessy and Krogman, we tried to look at the contradictions, especially looking at the difference on women's origins, women's classes, women's family status, women's geographic regions they are from. So in some way, we don't want to work on women as a unitary subject, but we want to identify that women group in pastoralist social ecological system, as in all the social ecological systems, are probably a complex subject. And most of their practices, experiences that can be divergent one from the others, and also most of their perceptions or most of their discourses can be different. And I can introduce these issues of intersectionality, that is a key focus, a key concept adopted by the feminist political ecology. Intersectionality means, for those of you it's not familiar with this concept, means that every one of us has a different social categories. And in some cases, there are different social categories that can intersect to create oppressions and discriminations. I mean, it's not the same to be a women in the rural and the urban, of course, and women within a so masculinized world, like the livestock management work, and also the pastoralist system. But at the same time, it's not the same to be a woman in this system if I am also a migrant woman, and if I am also a woman without land or without animal, and I work for others, so I am from a different class, social class. And this is a key concept that we tried to work under this framework of feminist political ecology. Feminist political ecology in general work on these power relations between subjects, but also within the same subject. And these are some of the papers that we have already submitted, and we are preparing, just to give you the slides for later on to read it and to wait for them. And we want to present in some way the results of such work and these different papers that we published. The objectives in general of resumed in our papers, in our work. First, we wanted to explore the experiences of women involved in extensive livestock farming and pastoralism, including their motivations, identity, challenges, and their sources of learning and support, mutual support. Second, we would understand their role in three main dimensions: in abandonment of the pastoralist social ecological system, in the conservation of the pastoralist social ecological systems, or in the innovation of the pastoralist social ecological systems. Third objective was to understand the experiences of women and their responses to multiple barriers and challenges at individual, local, sectoral, and social level, and including the environmental challenges, specifically climate change challenges. And fourth, we wanted to study, and we tried to understand how is moving the governance of pastoral and silvopastoral systems, and how women are contributing to such governance. So I give the floor to Elisa, I think, to explain the methods and the first results of one of our articles. And then we will continue with the others.
Yeah, thank you, Federica. Well, welcome everyone, and thanks for inviting us to share this work in the very interesting and packed program of this PACTORES course. So to follow with what Federica was just saying, basically we had these objectives, and we designed an approach that was very much related with our position also within pastoralism and within women and gender aspects. No? So we are all very much related with pastoral systems, passionate about them, and also active in certain activist spaces of women, no? and feminist spaces. So we decided to go for an approach based on a few but dense life histories, no? With interviews. So we interviewed almost 30 women from between 22 to 96 years old, considering women that were either directly but also indirectly involved in the livestock management. No? So we also incorporated family members, not only owners and co-owners or workers, but also women that were anyway part of this pastoralist system. Most of them participate in in one or two of the networks that we currently have in Spain, which are Ganaderas en Red, which is a statewide network of women pastoralists who are spread all over Spain and are connected through a virtual network. I will give you their contact later so you can explore more on them if you want. And also a regional similar network of the Ramaderes in Catalonia, which are like about 60 or 70 women, also pastoralists. But we also interviewed and spent time with some women that are not part of any of these networks. They have a diversity of type of livestock, no? But it was interesting to see that almost half of them have local or heritage breeds. Some of them were transhumans, some of them make some kind of direct marketing or value-added processing, some combine also with agritourism. So the diversity also of models was quite large, right? We aim at incorporating a diversity of profiles. And some of you might not be familiar with this approach of what are life histories, no? Well, it's a way of working with subjectivities. The objective is to record, to learn from the relationship between these subjectivities, which is the result of a construction process, and memory and the landscape. So it's not a methodology that is aims at obtaining information or evidence as such, like as something that is pretended to be objective, but just the opposite. So it requires a process of elaboration and interpretation. And this is why also we combine this approach with participant observation, with long stays with the women, with sharing with them all the spaces. At the moment, I was also part of the facilitation group of Ganaderas en Red. And we also facilitated some workshops, particularly with some of the members of Ganaderas en Red. And these workshops were meant to have like a two-way learning space so that we could already share with them some of the results, discuss with them what we thought were our findings, and also interpret them together. No? So engage participants in the interpretation of what we thought we were recording from them. And also, of course, expand participants and collect additional data. No? So also from within a more deliberative space. And because we, as Federica said, no, because we were committed on how to do this research also in a feminist way itself as a process, we also incorporated some artistic tools and methods. So in the workshop, we did some body work with tools from image theater, which is a part of social theater. And this is a work we are exploring with Fractal Collective, of which Federica and I are part, together with colleagues like Sara Mingorria and also Maria Era from ICTA. And also Federica particularly engaged in other artistic processes, like she's co-creating a book, this comic with a drawer, a painter. she also prepared an exhibition with both graphic materials and sculptures. There was one of the encounters with the ganaderas in Catalonia was graphically facilitated. You can see there roughly the outcome, no? And so we thought that by incorporating these approaches, we can also go beyond just the mere rational exchanges of information or the like. And it has been quite interesting, both to generate a particularly warm space, but also to enter deeper into some of the histories that were being shared on these relationships. And later on, what we did was analyze the transcripts through qualitative content with en vivo and coded our findings based on different things, including also the 6 fast propositions that Federica just explained. And we have worked in mostly 3 study areas in Spain, one in Andalusia, which is this southern region, also in the northwest, Zamora, León, Asturias, Cantabria, and then in the Pyrenees, in Catalonia and in Aragon. As I was saying, no, what we aim at having as key elements of our methodological approach were deeply rooted on these feminist epistemologies of science, no? And particularly 3 basic points: reflexivity, embodiment, and reciprocity. What do we understand by reflexivity? Well, it means it refers to examining one's position, one's belief, judgment, situation, no, the practices also during the research process. So we have been doing this among the 3 of us, no, or the 4 of us, also particularly Marta and Federica in Catalonia, and also trying to be honest in understanding and making visible how this situation may have influence on the research itself, no? On the relationship we build with the women, on our way of interpreting the data, and so on. Then embodiment is very much related with this issue of incorporating also tools beyond purely rational and traditional conventional modes, no? So it's an invitation to researchers to overcome this duality of mind and body, no? To challenge the positivist typical dichotomies, no, of the science-based knowledge production. So this included all the artistic approaches I said, but also a way of thinking, no, of designing these spaces. And then the third one, this reciprocity and ethic of care for transformation. It implied in our case, for instance, trying to commit on a long term, no? So we stepped into this project knowing, as you have seen, that this has been funded or supported partially by many different projects. This means that it has been an ongoing process for many years, and it will all anyway be, no? Like we don't know when it will be finished, but it's not a project thing based with a starting and an end point, no? We don't know where it will end. So we have a long-term commitment to our partners, to the women pastoralists, and we have engaged them as co-researchers. So we are in this continuous iterative process of meeting them, seeing, no, generating the next research questions, offering our training, our skills and resources of researchers and so on. So that we also nurture a culture of collaboration, no? And that the learning and the science and the research is created in a more horizontal way if possible. And this relationship is built on trust and respect and conviviality. And we think this is essential to understand what is happening and also to take care of each other and the process as such. So going down to some of our findings, and it's just some of them, but just a graph. Well, we explore with these women what have their life pathways been, no? How come they arrived to end up as pastoralists or as related to pastoralism? And we more or less, and they also did, as you can see there in the picture, classify themselves into some of these spheres, no? 3 main pathways into the sector, either via family, so we inherit land or the herd, by a partner, if you married into a herding family, or just from scratch, from zero. And as you can see, some of them found themselves actually in 2 or more of these spaces, no? Like having started from zero, but with grandparents that had cattle, for instance, or coming from a pastoralist family and also marrying or engaging with a partner that also is a farmer, no? So just to give you a grasp of how these look like now and what are the histories, some of the histories of these women. Well, one of the most typical is those that start because they already had a family tradition, no? And not all of them foresee an incorporation since the beginning. Actually, most frequently, they didn't perceive as incorporation, no? It was something that came afterwards. Most of them had even some secondary or post-secondary education, other off-farm professional experience, have had already some work opportunities, and then decided to come back. Some others, like this very young woman, Juana, 27, she knew in the beginning that she wanted to be a farmer. No? She says, the first year that I went on transhumance, the entire route, which for me was a bit harder because I was climbing to these mountains, I was 13 years old. I remember that everyone told me, look at that, you go good for nothing, you won't make it, look at you, how will you make it? And I arrived perfectly, she said, no? So she remembered, she had this memory super clear in her mind, how she had been discouraged, but she made it. Then another example of a history of someone that entered the activity by a partner is this case of Lourdes, a bit older, and she remembers, no, that at first it was a little hard. But what happens when you're young and in love and you have all these dreams? Well, no, she reflects this idealistic perspective when first you fall in love. But she says, now I'm happy, but in the beginning, it was a little hard, the adaptation. And then the life of husbandry, it's a profession for which I have always felt much respect and admiration. For me, the women ganaderas it's a thing, it's something I've always admired. And they call this recias, no, in this part of North Spain. So in this profile, again, there is a diversity, no? In some of them started already since the beginning, since they want to live with a partner, but some other incorporated later. Some of them also had previous studies. And a common element between them was that mother-in-laws usually were important mentors or teachers, no, in their incorporation into livestock farming. And then to have a grasp on the third type of profile, these women that have started from scratch, well, most of them were neo-rurals or newcomers into farming from urban origin. Some of them, particularly in Catalonia, had attended shepherd schools. We have several of them now these days in Spain, and they are starting to be an interesting way of incorporation for young people and also particularly for women. Also, some of them had previous studies, and many of these were among the youngest participants. No? So we can envision that there is like somehow a newcomer movement into farming in which women are playing a particularly important role. And this is the case, for instance, of Mariela, no? who is 30. She says that she had always been like shepherding or whatever. She always wanted to be a shepherd, but everyone laughed at her. No, they told her, no, come on, you have to be an astronaut, no, because the stars are nice. And but she was always interested, and then she found a partner, and he was also very much interested, and then they attended each of them one of the shepherd schools. In order to get different visions also and views on what the job is, no? And what we could see also is that their motivations varied immensely. Of course, they are slightly dependent on their pathway, but sometimes also they intertwine. So some of them have a lifelong passion to farm, or was in their blood, so to say. Some have this family inheritance or land or animals, and this created either a sense of obligation somehow, no, to continue the tradition. In the cases, there are 2 or 3 cases in which they didn't envision that they would incorporate themselves into farming, but when the father was about to leave or passed away, then they felt they could not leave it go, no, like they could not let it go and just be the tradition lost, and they felt a sense of obligation to maintain or to revive the farm. They also frequently report a strong sense of identity, and this happens particularly with transhumans, but not only. Some of them, as I just said, do it out of love, and this can be different ways, because in part some of them report that it was part of their attraction to their partner, but in some other cases it's a practical choice. It's not something that was particularly on their plans or that they particularly liked at first, but because they moved to a remote location due to their partner's job, then they didn't have the opportunity, no, for any other off-farm work. Some of them, particularly these new rurals, the newcomers, were more driven by a new lifestyle or even by political ideologies related with food sovereignty or with new emergent ruralities. And in one of the cases, for instance, there was this woman that felt and reported that she had felt forced because her husband had decided to buy land and then they needed to feed the family. So she had to make a living out of it, but she still today feels forced to do it and doesn't feel comfortable with it. And along their everyday life and their life histories, they face a number of barriers, no, which are common to many of them also. Particularly when thinking about barriers to entry, they mention access to resources, both land, financial, or other types, and access to legal ownership in the operation, as Federica also was mentioning in the introduction. And this, of course, goes hand in hand with the lack of autonomy, particularly economic, no, or a safety net. So in the cases where they enter the activity because through their partner, then it means that they are kind of tightened sometimes, no? This also is linked with a lack of decision-making autonomy in the herding tasks in the daily life. They struggle also then to create their own space within the farm with their own decisions and their own management. And this is also related with a lack of a built-in network of physical and moral support, no? Particularly again for those that were not familiarized with the pastoralism since the beginning. Some of them report social exclusion, and particularly from other women in the community, but also from their own families, for instance. And some of them complain about some household dynamics, no, with power relations, the difficulties to build their own way of doing things and change and innovate, no? This is very much related also with the opposition from family members to any kind of innovation. Of course, the typical difficulties with the bureaucracy of incorporating that are common also to like do any new incorporation, and also difficulties to access knowledge, which then goes hand in hand also with mistakes that can be costly, no? So and then make the initial steps quite difficult. So many of these factors are not only related with gender, of course, you might say, but are also intersected with other factors like being young or being from urban origin or having family in the area or not. And in general, what they report beyond this moment of the entry of the incorporation is that they bear multiple burdens. No? So frequently they mention about this threefold labor, no? The one in the farm, the one at home, and then if they are active in organizations like in Ganaderas en Red or in cooperatives, then it's kind of a third job, no? So, and sometimes there is even a fourth if the activity is not sustainable enough, and then they have to have an extra job for family economic sustainability. Then they also report on trade-offs between being active in these collective spaces and then taking care sufficiently well of their own operations, no? To have sufficient energy and time to improve also their business. They also perceive sexism continuously in the moment of selling, of negotiating prices, in relating with other people within the sector, and also within the family. And overall, again, this lack of economic independence. So then we were interested also in, as I was mentioning, particularly in the workshops, to put in common some of the strategies that they have developed to overcome these barriers, these difficulties, so that they could also share from, between them what were their tricks, so to say, to overcome these barriers. And well, they mentioned finding support in other families or learning from employees also. This hands-on experience, now they say very frequently that they just learn with the School of Hard Knocks, unfortunately, but also the formal training in schools of shepherds. And very, very, very frequently what came out was many of them use humor and auto-irony as a tool to came out of many of these super uncomfortable situations, even within the family or in more public spaces in the sector, just laughing at oneself or at the others, in a way of losing tensions and relaxing, but also being able to speak up, and to denounce what they felt as oppressions. And very frequently, they also mention this mutual support, these alliances, particularly the ones that have been emerging in the last years, in the last 4 or 5 years, with these virtual networks also, women that support each other in every day because they have a continuous communication through virtual networks, like WhatsApp or Slack or other platforms, and that have also made them build a collective identity and building not only internally, but also so that it can be published and it can be made evident in social media and to society at large. So they have now a common, recognized, very much acknowledged points that I would say these days in Spain is one of the most heard voices in pastoralism is the voice of women. Hand it down now to Fede again.
Yeah. Thank you. So challenges. Elisa was talking about some barriers and strategies, and then we tried to explore specifically challenges like environmental challenges. As Elsa already said, climate change is negatively affecting livestock farming and pastoralism in general, by reducing primary productivity, decreasing water availability, increasing the frequency of extreme events, specifically in the Mediterranean that is at the moment at a tipping point. So it needs urgent responses to this. And according to the Spanish National Climate Change Adaptation Plan, the livestock management practices are very powerful in adapting and also mitigating climate variability. And also recently the panel of IPCC report demonstrated the potential of carbon storage, for instance, of pasturelands. So our question was, yes, what about women specifically? How they are perceiving such environmental challenges, and how they are responding from their silences in some way. Very briefly, because we already talked about this conceptual contribution from the feminist research, but we used specifically in this part of the research the concept that Elisa presented to you before of embodiment, but applied it to the climate change. It means in some way, just to be easy in explaining this, it means usually some of the authors say that we are in front of the urgency and emergency, and we are not visualizing that, because climate change mainly has been studied as a biophysical event. And we follow those authors that say that climate change should be an embodied subject. We should not only think about climate change and study climate change, but also look at what the people who is carrying with the bodies and with the motion is challenging climate change. Other two concepts are intersectionality that I presented before, and look at the everyday life of women and relations to find how they are responding differently depending on their social positions, how they are responding to these challenges. And we adopted both the life histories, but also we also adopted an analysis of social media, social networks, especially Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, in order to capture how women are perceiving climate change and how women are responding to this. Just to give you very briefly, because I think we are a little bit out of time, some of the answers from women. This is a tweet from 2020, and the woman was capturing her feeling when the fire arrived very close to the house and where part of the territory and the pastures were lost. And she said, we remember, these years remember us that we are so fragile. So they have a very strong perception through their own bodies and feelings how they are fragile. In fact, in one of the meetings that we had in Catalonia, one of the requests for researchers was we needed to strengthen our partnership because we needed to work together to create warning plans and to create plans of evacuation for fires, because we are really concerned about that. But also they are, wildfire are just one of the environmental hazards linked to climate change that women pastoralists portray as really important in their everyday feeling. Impacts of floods and landslides, and also many references to prolonged drought are other of the events that they describe. Sorry, Elisa, I just go a little bit faster just for the time. This is an example of how they described to us, and through Twitter we analyzed the multiple impacts of long-lasting drought related to the soil, related to the grasses and the pasture conditions, but also related to the animals, related to their cultural way of managing and their knowledge on managing the livestock. For instance, the time and space of movement from summer to winter into territories, etc. And this is quite important factors of changes for them at all the levels, at ecological and dimensions, at ecological dimensions, in the social organizations, and in the cultural impacts on local traditional ecological knowledge. How women respond to such different barrier challenges, including environmental challenges. In our work, we tried to explore these women's roles in pastoral social ecological systems, and we found three main roles of women: a role of abandonment of the system in some case, a key role in the conservation of the system, and a key role in the innovation of such system. And we would present to you some of the results in these three dimensions. In terms of abandonment, we explored at three different levels such roles: at the household local level, at the sectorial level, and then at the society level. Women are keys in the abandonment because, how they said, in most of the case, they are the threads for the intergenerational transfer of knowledge, first of all, but also of identity. And in many cases, they said to us on several interviews, they said to us that they are not encouraging in more cases, in most of the cases, their children to finish school, because they want to encourage them to finish the school because they want to give them more choices for the future due to the heart of having this work. But they don't want to encourage other person to go into the business, even if they recognize that they can help everyone who wants to enter into the business. At sectoral level, they have mainly, we recognize that they have a role, especially in abandoning certain practices, like in the case of transhumance. They have had roles in persuading sometimes parents and husbands to be more sedentary, as one of the participants said before, also because they want to be more sedentary in some area with more access to services than in others. At society level, we recognize a key role in how women, in the abandonment, how women decided to leave the rural, and also how women decide or have a reluctance in marry someone from the rural or from the pastoral world. Then we recognize the roles of women, Elisa, the next one, in the conservation. So they have a key role in conserving the system. First of all, because they recover and preserve recipe for product transformation, but they also are conserving, in most of the case, the local culture and knowledges, traditional knowledges, such as we discovered in most of the interviewed people on ethno-veterinary knowledge. They have also a key role in the households of instilling these values and pride, and in these transference, intergenerational transfers of knowledge, of identity, of values. At sectoral level, opposite to some other interviews that we said before that have a key role in abandonment, they have also a key role in maintaining transhumance, because they see in the transhumance the identity of the pastoralism and also all the ecological and social dimensions implied. And they have a key role in preserving local breeds. At society level, they recognize their key role in general to valorize the rural life and to maintain lived and productive this rural life. They are protecting the casa, for instance, in the Pyrenees. It means the unit of production and reproduction, but also they are protecting the community, and they are conserving the community, and they are protecting the rural in general. This is their feeling of their key role. And finally, their key roles in innovation. We have several cases of innovation in pastoralism where women had a very interesting role. Hazards participants have described a key role in innovating some specific practice in the livestock management, in the pasture and natural resources management, innovating in terms of the multifunctionality of the house, specifically with added work, added job that can have an income on farm, another income, like in the case of agritourism. they are most of the cases, they are in charge of the administrative management, and in most of the cases of new rurals and newcomers, especially when they are from the school of shepherds, they introduce new ways of administration of the livestock operation. And some of them are capturing added values of products with a short chain, especially when they are related to dairy transformations, or they are in contact for handcraft works, etc., products, etc. And in some of the cases, we also have some example from them of specific innovations related to the responses to environmental challenges. For instance, we recognize in one of the interviews, the woman recognized, one of the women recognized a system for worm composting, for composting the waste that could reduce greenhouse gas emissions and provide natural fertilizers for fields that usually are part of the provisions of the pastoralism activities. At a sectoral level, we have just highlighted here their consciousness of their key role in accessing positions of responsibility in organization, and in some cases leaderships in such organization, facilitated also by the social media and the digital communication application they, especially newcomers, have new access to. And at society level, they recognized their role in participating in research, especially in the sector on the topics, but also how they are involved in children's education. And we had some cases of their involvement in local school to transfer this identity of the rural related to the pastoralism to the schools. They are participating also in event and social networks. And especially we recognize a sort of new consciousness from a feminist movement, a new consciousness of these key roles in rural areas and specifically in pastoralism, and key implications and engagement in local politics. And one of the society really relevant innovation is these new networks that Elisa probably will explain in some slides. And now Elisa will present you a last part of our work, that is work she led on the governance of Iberian silvopastoral system and the role of women on such governance.
Yes, thanks, Ferre. I am aware that we are running against the clock now, so I will also skip a bit, go a bit faster. So yeah, we were invited to reflect on this, thanks to Teresa Pinto Correia and Pedro Mari, and well, some people are leading this book on the governance of Iberian silvopastoral systems, and we're invited to share some of our research regarding this role of women in the governance of the silvopastoral systems. And there are interesting outcomes here, no? For instance, again, with some testimonies, you can read this later when you have the presentation yourself, no? But Susana here in the south of Spain, she remembered how she was invited to be part of the cooperative, like as a decorative element, no? So because it was nice to have a woman, but then she bring in some innovations like training, and she was there in every meeting until late at night, and she introduced some innovations, no? And then at some point after 9 years, she was tired and she decided to quit, and they didn't want they didn't let her go, no? They begged her not to leave. she had become something very different, no? from what they imagined at the beginning. Or this other woman, Anna, that says that recognized that women have always to prove that they are not the same as men. Also in the way we would like to be organized, no? That there is this humanity also related with feelings of sorority, no? With named as such by those that are more involved into feminist movements. So that some characteristics associated traditionally to women, like empathy, can facilitate that more individualistic approaches that are usually, it's a characteristic that is usually associated to pastoralism, individualism. That is not the case for women, no? And then women have this capacity to unite and to forget or try to leave aside what divides people and then try to gather them together, no? So far, what particularly these reflections also come from this work that Ganaderas en Red has been doing in the last year, since 2016 when it was created, no? They got major prizes. They have been invited to the main spaces of pastoralism action and decision making in Spain. They recently also sat down in a conversation with the ministry. So what they have been perceiving, and they say that participating at the local level, participating in local associations and such and movements can improve their direct marketing. So it has a direct impact on their profitability also as a way. It also improves their social well-being because they feel more accompanied. It's a space for creating also social bonds, mutual support, and as such also is a way to escape the family or the usually family tight bonds, and particularly when they are married to men that are quite oppressive or typing, no? So they feel that being engaged in such organizations improves their integration in the community, and that they have been able also to slowly introduce changes, for instance, in education or in training, by participating in these schools of shepherds or in the schools, rural schools, like Federica was saying. And many of them are engaging in this diversification of the farming project, particularly with other women, by supporting each other, by convincing, or being convinced by a colleague or a friend, like, yeah, this is working for me, let's try to do it because you can make it, no? So they feel that they can also, they are working as engines for other rural women to be empowered and to develop new ideas and new innovations for their activities to be sustainable, not only economically, but also socially. And then they have also realized that by being part of collective organizations, they are also accessing information. Because usually, traditional ways of information circulation was in bars, but these days there is like another complete dimension. There is another scale of information transmission. And by being present in these spaces and in social networks, they are also accessing different types of information that are relevant for their own management and also for policy incidents, for decision making. So just here's some more info in case you want to follow on social networks, Ganaderas en Red or Ramaderes de Catalunya. I really invite you to go and check. There is a YouTube channel by Ganaderas en Red also, where you can see many videos, amazing. Some of them have subtitles, so I really encourage you to do so. And then we just wanted to close with some what they stated as their main claims, just as a summary. They request administrative support to reduce the double or this triple or quadruple burden that I was mentioning beforehand. This can not only be done by them. This needs to be a social commitment the public administration need to support. And in this case, for instance, they mentioned, I read there was in the chat this example of France, the example of France where there is this shared shepherds, no, that can go from one farm to the other so that people can have a rest or go on holidays or whatever. They also request regulatory changes to facilitate entrepreneurship, like for instance, the changes in the regulatory systems and the hygienic and sanitary normative legislation so that they can transform products on farm more easily and sell them also more easily directly. Also, the third claim is to incorporate livestock farming into education on values in school. What they are perceiving is that it's critical to transmit this sense of place, this culture of pastoralism with positive, with a positive load, no, as a culture and as a social asset into the new generation in schools already, in order to counterbalance sorry, the negative images that have been being transmitted along generations. And also to improve their own training, because they feel that usually public training is also not tailored to their needs in terms of time, for instance. No, sometimes they have to leave home for several days or weeks and they cannot do that, so then they cannot assist courses, or the timing is not designed for women that unfortunately live in a society in which co-responsibility in care of children or elders is not distributed within the family. So if the time is to do the course, to go to the course is the same, in which they have to make the dinner and bath and so on, then they are immediately excluded. And then that the topics that interest them, for instance, for diversification, is usually not very much within the topics for which there is a public offer of training, no? Like, for instance, product transformation. And then many of them mention also the need to facilitate again transhumance for caring and caring for the roads, for these infrastructures that sustain the transhumans, and not only for those that are already doing it and that have continued or maintained the tradition, but also for the future, particularly because they envision that mobility will be, and as it has always been, a key strategy in the face of environmental changes, and that is critical for the survival and the sustainability of pastoralism, to make sure that transhumance is preserved. So this is it. We thank you very much.